The city had a strange stillness on Christmas Eve. Snow blanketed the sidewalks of Manhattan like a white quilt, muffling the usual chaos of horns and chatter. Neon signs flickered, their glow reflected on icy streets, but the air carried something softer that night, a hush, a pause in the relentless rhythm of New York. Inside a sleek glass tower on Fifth Avenue, Liam Carter stepped out of the elevator, his expensive overcoat draped neatly over his arm. At 38, he was the kind of man people described with both awe and envy. The billionaire CEO who could turn any failing business into gold. His face was all sharp lines and discipline, his reputation one of power and control. Yet beneath that tailored perfection was a hollowness he rarely admitted, even to himself. Christmas used to mean something. Once upon a time, he had decorated a tree with his late wife, whispered silly bedtime stories to his son Max, and believed in the magic of small things. But after her death, the holidays had become an empty ritual, a season of lights with no warmth. Tonight he had stayed late at the office, trying to drown out the silence of his penthouse. He adjusted his scarf and stepped into the biting air. Snowflakes landed on his dark hair, melting instantly. The streets were quiet, almost deserted, when a faint sound cut through the night. "Sir, I was just looking for my mom." Liam froze. His gaze swept the alley beside his building where the shadow of a dumpster loomed. There, huddled on flattened cardboard boxes, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. Her coat hung off her shoulders like it belonged to someone else. One shoe was missing, her small toes red against the snow. Her tiny hands clutched a pink lunchbox cracked at the corner. For a moment, Liam thought his eyes deceived him. But then she shivered violently, her teeth chattering as she tried to pull the coat tighter. His chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt in years. Kneeling down, he lowered his voice. "Hey, are you okay?" The girl blinked up at him. Her lashes were wet with snowflakes, her cheeks raw from the cold. She hesitated before answering, as if unsure whether to trust him. "I was looking for Mommy. She works at the hospital. I followed the lights, but I got lost." The innocence in her voice hit him like a punch. Liam carefully unwound his cashmere scarf and wrapped it gently around her neck. She clutched it as though it were treasure, her small fingers barely peeking out of her sleeves. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Ella." Her voice cracked on the word. A cough followed, dry, harsh, far too heavy for such a small chest. Liam's protective instincts surged. He pulled out his phone with a steadiness that belied the urgency in his gut. "I'm calling an ambulance." Ella's eyes widened with fear. "No, please don't take me away. Mommy said if I get lost I should just wait, she'll find me." His throat tightened. She was terrified, not of him, but of being separated from her mother. He lowered his phone for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Ella, I promise, we'll find your mom. But first, I need to make sure you're warm and safe, okay?" Tears welled in her eyes, then spilled down her flushed cheeks. She nodded, too exhausted to resist. Liam quickly called 911, his voice betraying a tremor as he reported the situation. Minutes stretched like hours in the cold. Liam shrugged off his overcoat and draped it over her fragile frame. She sagged into it, her head resting against his chest when he lifted her. She was so light, frighteningly light, as though hunger had carved away at her little body. "You're safe now," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Snow swirled around them as sirens finally pierced the night. Red and blue lights danced against the glass skyscrapers. Paramedics rushed forward, wrapping Ella in blankets, checking her pulse. Yet even as they worked, her small hand clung to Liam's sleeve, refusing to let go. "Can he come with me?" she whispered to a medic, her voice barely audible. Liam met the medic's eyes. The man gave a brief nod. "Of course." He climbed into the ambulance, the cracked pink lunchbox resting on his lap. As the doors slammed shut and the siren wailed, Ella leaned against him, her eyelids fluttering. "Mommy said, 'Follow the lights,'" she mumbled. "So I did." Her voice faded, and she drifted into sleep. For the first time in years, Liam felt something more powerful than money, more urgent than business. He felt the weight of a fragile life in his arms, and the overwhelming need to protect it. The ambulance rattled through the snowy streets, siren echoing against the tall glass buildings. Liam sat rigid on the bench. Ella curled against his chest, wrapped in more blankets than her small frame could hold. The cracked pink lunchbox sat between his, polished shoes like an odd relic, cheap plastic in the hands of a billionaire. Yet to Ella, it was clearly her most precious possession. "Temperature's low, but she's stabilizing," one paramedic said, scribbling on a chart. "We'll need to get her checked for hypothermia and dehydration." Liam barely registered the words. All he saw was her pale face, lashes brushing her cheeks as she dozed fitfully. Every so often, a cough racked her tiny body, and she clutched his shirt tighter as though he might disappear if she let go. When they arrived, the bright fluorescent lights of the hospital stung his eyes. Nurses bustled around, taking Ella's vitals, slipping an oxygen mask gently over her nose. Liam followed, unwilling to let her out of his sight. "Sir," a nurse tried to stop him. "Family only." Her words stabbed unexpectedly. Family. He was nothing to her, just a stranger who had stumbled across her in the snow. Yet, before he could respond, Ella stirred, her small hand reaching toward him. "Stay," she whispered hoarsely. The nurse hesitated, then relented with a nod. Liam pulled a chair beside the hospital bed and sat, his expensive coat still draped around her. For a long while, he simply watched her breathe, chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. After some time, Ella's eyes fluttered open. The oxygen mask fogged slightly as she looked at him. "You didn't leave." Liam leaned forward, his voice steady but gentle. "I promised, didn't I?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile before fading again into seriousness. "Mommy said people leave. They always leave." The words were too heavy for such a little girl. Liam swallowed hard. "Not everyone leaves, Ella." She studied him as though weighing the truth of his words. Then, with surprising effort, she shifted and reached for the lunchbox. She placed it on her lap, opening it with trembling fingers. Inside were a few crumpled drawings, a broken crayon, and a small photograph, a young woman in scrubs, smiling. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, "That's Mommy," Ella said proudly. "She works at the hospital. She said she saves people even when she's tired. That's why I followed the lights. I thought I'd find her." Liam took the photo carefully, studying the woman's kind face. Something about her eyes struck him, not just the weariness, but the resilience. He handed it back gently. "She looks very brave." "She is," Ella said with conviction. "She tells me stories every night, even if she has no voice left. She didn't come home tonight." Her voice cracked. "So I tried to find her." Liam's chest tightened. He thought of his own son, Max, who had stopped asking for bedtime stories after his mother died. He remembered the way he'd buried himself in work, too afraid to face the grief written on his boy's face. A nurse entered, adjusting Ella's IV. "Her vitals are improving, but she's malnourished and exhausted. Do you know her mother's name? We can try to locate her." Ella perked up, her voice urgent. "Hannah Grace, she's a nurse. She was supposed to come home after her shift." The nurse's eyes widened, slightly. "Hannah Grace, she's here. She collapsed earlier during her shift. Severe exhaustion. She's in the recovery ward." Ella gasped. Her little hands flew to her mouth as tears pooled in her eyes. "Mommy?" The nurse smiled reassuringly. "She'll be okay, sweetheart. She just needs rest." Ella turned to Liam, clutching his sleeve with a desperation that went straight to his heart. "Can we see her, please?" Liam stood, his jaw tightening. For years, he had lived in a world where power and wealth solved everything. But here, in this hospital room, he was just a man watching a child's fragile hope flicker in her eyes. He rested a hand gently on her blanket. "We'll see her, Ella. I promise." And for the first time in years, Liam felt that a promise wasn't just words. It was a bond, a responsibility, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something bigger than himself. Snow was still falling when Liam finally left Ella's room hours later. She had drifted into a peaceful sleep, one hand curled protectively around the photograph of her mother. Nurses had promised to alert him when Hannah was awake enough to see visitors. For now, he needed to go home, though home had felt like anything but that for years. His chauffeur waited outside the hospital, but Liam barely noticed the warmth of the leather seats or the hum of the engine. He kept replaying Ella's voice in his mind. Mommy said people leave. They always leave. By the time the car pulled into the private drive of his Upper East Side townhouse, it was past midnight. The place glowed with the faint light of Christmas. Decorations arranged by staff more out of duty than joy. Inside, a fire crackled in the living room, where his son Max sat curled on the sofa in his pajamas, clutching a book. The boy looked up as the door opened. At 10 years old, Max had inherited Liam's sharp eyes, but lately they had dulled with distance. "You're late," Max said quietly. Guilt pricked Liam's chest. He loosened his scarf, choosing his words with care. "I had something important to take care of tonight." Max closed the book, his small hands lingering on the worn cover. It was the same story his mother used to read him every Christmas Eve. He hadn't asked Liam to read it in years. What could be more important than Christmas Eve? Max's voice cracked. Mom used to say it was the one night families were supposed to be together. Liam sat beside him, though the space between them felt wider than any distance. He longed to explain, to tell his son about the little girl in the snow and the mother fighting exhaustion to keep her child safe. But how could he? Instead, he reached for honesty. "I found someone who needed help tonight, Max. A little girl named Ella. She was alone and scared. I couldn't just walk away." Max's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something worse, hurt. "You always find someone else to take care of, Dad. But what about me?" The words landed like a blow. Liam flinched. For years he had hidden behind his empire, building walls of meetings and mergers to protect himself from grief. In doing so, he had left Max to navigate loss alone. "I'm sorry," Liam said, voice low. I thought I was protecting you by keeping busy. But I see now. I wasn't here when you needed me most." Silence stretched, broken only by the pop of the fire. Max looked away, blinking rapidly. Was she okay? The girl? Liam exhaled, grateful for the shift. "She's safe now. Her name is Ella. She reminded me a little of you when you were younger." Something softened in Max's face. He turned back slowly. "Will we see her again?" The question surprised Liam. He had expected resentment, not curiosity. "I think so," he admitted. "Her mother's in the hospital, too. They don't have much. I want to make sure they're okay." Max nodded, thoughtful. After a pause, he whispered, "Mom would have wanted that. She was always helping people, even when she was sick." The memory washed over them both, raw and unspoken. For the first time in a long while, Liam reached out and pulled his son into an embrace. Max stiffened at first, then melted against him, silent tears dampening his shirt. "I miss her every day, Dad," Max said brokenly. "So do I," Liam whispered. "But maybe helping Ella and her mom. Maybe it's a way we can honor her." Max didn't reply, but his arms tightened around his father's waist. In that moment, Liam felt something shift. The walls he had built for years began to crack, letting in not just grief, but hope. Later that night, after Max had fallen asleep, Liam stood by the window, watching the snow swirl under the streetlights. He thought of Ella's frail hand clutching his sleeve, of Hannah Grace collapsing from exhaustion, of Max's quiet plea for presence. For the first time, Liam understood. Money could build empires, but only love could rebuild a family. And maybe, just maybe, Christmas had given him a second chance to try. Morning light crept through the hospital blinds, painting pale stripes across the sterile white walls. Liam had dozed off in the chair outside Ella's room, his coat draped over him like a makeshift blanket. The distant sounds of beeping machines and muffled footsteps stirred him awake. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Hayes, Hannah. Grace is awake. She's asking for her daughter." Liam straightened immediately, exhaustion falling away like a shed skin. He followed the nurse down the corridor, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tile. His heart beat faster than he expected. For Ella, yes, but also for the woman who had raised her with such resilience. When they entered the recovery ward, he saw her, Hannah Grace. She lay propped against thin pillows, her face pale but her features undeniably strong. Her hair, dark with strands of silver, was pulled back in a messy bun. Even in a hospital gown, there was a quiet dignity about her. At her bedside sat Ella, her tiny hands gripping her mother's with fierce determination, as if holding her could keep the world from falling apart. Tears streaked the girl's cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "Mommy, you're awake. I thought you left me." Hannah's weak fingers brushed Ella's hair back tenderly. "Oh, sweetheart, I'd never leave you. I just worked too hard and my body said no more." Her voice was raspy, yet filled with love. Liam lingered near the door, not wanting to intrude. But Hannah's gaze shifted, and their eyes met. For a moment he felt caught, like she could see right through the armor he'd spent years wearing. "Mr. Hayes," she asked softly, "you're the one who found my Ella?" He nodded, stepping closer. "She was alone in the snow last night. She nearly froze. I couldn't just leave her." Emotion flashed in Hannah's tired eyes, gratitude mingled with shame. "I should have been there, but I collapsed during my shift. I didn't even realize she might." Her voice broke, guilt choking her words. Liam raised a hand gently. "You don't have to explain. You've given more than most people ever could. I've seen what exhaustion does." Ella never stopped, believing you'd come back. At that, Hannah turned to her daughter, tears welling. "You're my brave girl." Ella leaned closer, whispering, "He stayed with me, Mommy. He didn't leave." The words made Liam's chest tighten. He cleared his throat, glancing at Hannah again. "She's remarkable. Stronger than most adults I know. That's because of you." For the first time, a faint smile touched Hannah's lips. It softened, her face transforming exhaustion into quiet beauty. "She's all I have," she murmured. "I'm a nurse, yes, but the hours are long, and the pay never seems enough. I've had to choose between sleep and putting food on the table." Liam listened, each confession striking him harder than any corporate negotiation ever had. He had sat across from board members worth billions, but never had someone's honesty disarmed him like this. "I understand sacrifice," he said carefully, "but no one should have to carry it alone." Hannah tilted her head, curiosity flickering. "You say that like you've carried your own weight too long." The observation startled him. Few people dared to look past his title, his fortune. Yet here was this woman, lying frail in a hospital bed, seeing the loneliness he had buried for years. Before he could answer, Ella squeezed both their hands together with childish determination. "Mommy, maybe we don't have to be alone anymore. Mr. Hayes has a son. We could all be friends." Both adults froze, caught off guard by the innocence of the suggestion. Hannah chuckled weakly, though her eyes shimmered. Children dream bigger than adults allow themselves to. Liam found himself smiling, an expression that felt foreign, yet right. Sometimes children see the truth better than we do. Silence fell, not uncomfortable but full, like the pause before music begins again. Liam looked at Hannah, truly looked, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir that had nothing to do with obligation or duty. It was possibility. 1 week later, Christmas morning dawned with soft snowfall blanketing the city. In the hospital common room, a small tree glittered with lights Liam had quietly arranged. Ella squealed as she and Max hung ornaments side by side, their laughter echoing like a carol more beautiful than any choir. Hannah sat nearby, cheeks warmed with color again, watching her daughter glow with happiness she hadn't seen in years. Liam stood beside her, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. When their eyes met, no words were needed. Gratitude, respect, and something deeper passed between them. something neither had believed possible again. As the children exchanged handmade gifts, Ella ran to her mother's lap. "See, Mommy, we're not alone anymore." Hannah kissed her forehead, whispering, "No, my love, we're not." Liam reached for Max's shoulder, then glanced at Hannah. Maybe this is what Christmas was always meant to be. Not things, not wealth, just family. And in that quiet hospital room, 4 hearts once broken began to heal together. For Liam Hayes, the man who once thought he had everything, this was the true miracle. Love he could never buy, but only give and receive. By New Year's Eve, Hannah and Ella weren't guests, they were family. Max and Ella's laughter filled the halls that once echoed with silence. Hannah's tired eyes now shone with peace, knowing she didn't have to fight life alone. Liam looked at them, the woman who healed his soul, the children who restored his purpose, and understood his empire meant nothing without them. Love had rebuilt what grief destroyed. As fireworks lit the midnight sky, he pulled them close and whispered, "You are my forever. My greatest fortune isn't built. It's here, in my arms. Home. Family. Forever."